go. Yes. All right. I think everyone's taking their seats here. Thank you all for coming out in the cold, and thanks to those of you joining us virtually as well. Tonight's program, like so much of the good we do, is made possible by your support of our annual All-in-One campaign. The 2022 All-in-One campaign theme is Do Good That Goes Everywhere, and it's easy to do good that goes everywhere through our Jewish Federation. With your gift to All-in-One campaign, you'll help continue to bring security resources and training to our Jewish community, invest in education in our young people through Gan Shalom, Beit Sefer Shalom, Engman Camp Shalom, PJ Library, and Student to Student. Care for our most vulnerable friends and neighbors through Jewish Family Services, build bridges, combat anti-Semitism, advocate, educate, collaborate, and mobilize with the Jewish Community Relations Council. Educate the community about Iowa's Jewish history and culture through the Iowa Jewish Historical Society. Connect with Israel and Jewish peoplehood through our partnership together. Protect and strengthen our home here at Casp Terrace. Prepare for the future with the Des Moines Jewish Foundation. And much, much more. You may never meet those whose lives you've changed through your support, but we want to thank you on their behalf because the impact of your generosity is felt every day by so many across our Jewish community. If you've already made your gift to the All-in-One campaign for 2022, thank you for your kindness and generosity. If you have yet to make this year's campaign gift, please consider making your gift today. Bob has pledge cards with him. So find Bob or another staff member to grab a pledge card and make your pledge today. Thank you again for your support and generosity. I want to now introduce our speaker for the evening, Alina Spaulding. Alina is one of the most sought after speakers on the topic of philanthropy and impact giving. Born in the Ukraine, with the help of the Jewish Federations of North America, JFNA, Alina's family immigrated to the US when she was just 5 years old, eventually landing in New Jersey and now lives in Greensboro, North Carolina. Alina has been actively involved in working with JFNA in Hungary to help the Ukrainian refugees escaping from the Russian invasion. Our community was proud to raise in excess of $75,000 for JFNA's Ukraine Relief Fund, and we are so grateful to volunteers like Alina who help translate our fundraising efforts here directly into assistance for so many of these refugees. Having been involved in leadership and fundraising for 24 years in a variety of agencies in the US and overseas, Alina feels there is no larger privilege than channeling philanthropic gifts. Alina has done transformational philanthropic work in the areas of housing sustainability, Jewish day schools, Jewish Federations of North America, Joint Distribution Committee, youth engagement, the arts, trauma, mental health, and cancer care. She's a subject matter expert in innovative development strategy, helps direct major donors and philanthropists in their giving, and enjoys coaching new talent as they enter the professional world. Alina mentioned in an interview back in April of this year a quote that really resonated with her. In philanthropy, there are two hands, one gives and one receives. She commented that she knows so deeply what it means to be on the receiving hand that helping with the Ukrainian refugees felt like an opportunity to be on the giving side, completing her own circle. We thank her for taking the time to be with us here tonight. Please welcome Alina Spaulding.
That's a really long intro. Really thorough. Now you really know me. Can you hear me all right? Is the mic on? Still, it's not on?
It might be muted. At least that's what they told me yesterday when I led music.
I will not be put on mute. What? Ben, help me.
Benjamin, we need you.
I'm going to speak from here. What? The show's got to go on. I don't know what to tell you. It's got to go on. Yeah, that's right. Oh, got it. Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? What about here? Okay, I had the greatest day ever. And that was a really long introduction. And I'm going to tell you something that, I'm going to talk with you about something that feels really important to me, which is how we are all connected in this room. So yesterday I got here and Bob and I were talking about some mutual friends, and like already we're like one step away from being related. And I want to talk to you a little bit about something that you may or may not know, which is kind of the life of Jews in the former Soviet Union in the 70s. And I have to tell you that when I tell people this story, my story, people are like, yeah, pieces of that sound familiar, but maybe some pieces of that are new. And so I want to tell you that the reason my family story feels so unusual and so unique is because my parents were Jews living in the former Soviet Union in the 70s. That's not unique. There were tons of Jews living in the former Soviet Union in the 70s because they weren't allowed to get out. But my family's story is unique because my father was an Olympic hopeful. He was a skier. And what you may or may not know, or may not remember from that time, is that people who were perceived to be useful to the government had access to different privileges and opportunities that regular Jews living in the former Soviet Union in the 70s did not have. And my family fell into this very, very unique pocket of people, of Jews who were living a fairly comfortable life. And so because of my dad's extraordinary skill, we had access to a nicer place to live and better food and better medical care. We had access to things like the ballet and the theater, things that like Soviets found to be so uniquely valuable. And so my family was a Jewish family living in the former Soviet Union, living a fairly comfortable life. I was born in November of 1973. I don't want you to do any heavy lifting. I'm turning 49 this month. So I was born in November of 1973, and in February of 1974, just a few months after I was born, my father was in a terrible skiing accident where he fell and broke his leg. And from the time it took them to remove my dad from the mountain where he trained, they had evicted my parents from their apartment. They'd given them until the end of the day to get out. And my father, who was perceived to be so useful, so valuable to the team, was not even taken to the athletes' hospital located directly at the bottom of the mountain where he trained all those months. Instead, he was taken to a polyclinic in a ghetto where he was not seen by a doctor or a medical professional for 8 days. 8 days because he was Jewish and he'd just become worthless. And after 8 days of waiting, he was not just seen by a doctor. He was seen by a medic, which is not a doctor, who told my parents that my dad broke the big bone, the femur bone in his leg. And he needed to have traction to reset it and then surgery. But in order for my father to have that surgery that he needed so that he could walk, forget about ski, my mother, who was 21 years old with a newborn, me, would need to collect all of the items for the surgery to take place on the black market. And if she was not able to collect those items, he was either not having surgery or having surgery without them. It was their choice. If you can imagine, it took my mother from February of 1974 to October to collect what she needed for my dad to have the surgery. And it was clear immediately after the surgery that it was a non-success. My father had hepatitis, he became very ill, his condition continued to decline. By 1975, my parents were told that my dad, who was in the kind of physical condition that it takes to be an Olympic hopeful, was going to die within 5 years because of a broken leg. Like to this day, I don't even know how to connect those pieces. And so my mom and my dad, they began to live like all the other Jews. They didn't have access to resources. They didn't have wealthy family members anywhere that were going to help them. They didn't have access to, health care. We lived in a one-room flat with my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my grandfather. And we began to live like all the other Jews in the 70s. I want to tell you that sometime around 1977, my mom first heard that there's an organization, and it's called something like the JDC, and they come to Russia and they rescue Jews. And my mom was like, maybe if we had wealthy relatives in Des Moines, maybe if we had wealthy relatives anywhere, maybe we would have a chance. But we didn't have that. And not only that, my mom is like, no one's going to come to Kharkoc to rescue our family because no one even knows we're here. And this, my friends, is where she was wrong. Because in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, you and people like you convened in your homes, in your synagogues, in your community centers, in your, town halls. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Jews from all over the world said, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zelazah. Each Jew is responsible for one another, and I'm not going to sit here in the comfort of my home or my JCC. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to do something. And we had my mom tells this story that she's like, in 1978, I went to my friend's house, and my friend said, bring all of your paperwork and come to my house. And my mom goes to this lady's house, and there is an American woman living in someone's closet. And she is making false papers for families like mine. Now, I don't know how many of you have been to the former Soviet Union, but I can assure you it is not a country known in the 70s for its ample closets. So to have American people leaving their family in what is a really dangerous situation, to live in some closet in Kharkoc in order to help families like mine, that is nothing short of a miraculous thing. And you know why she was there? Because this organization exists. Because federations all over the world and Jews all over the world said, I'm somehow responsible for these people. I don't know them. I don't know what their needs are. I don't know exactly what's going on over there. I'm not exactly sure where the Ukraine is. Whatever it is that you did or didn't say, you and people like you, sitting in rooms exactly like this, stood up for people like me. In 1979, 55,000 Jews were rescued from the former Soviet Union. That is a lot of people. It's really a lot of Jews, 55,000 Jews. 1979, in 1 year alone, among them, my mother, my father, and me. We crossed the border first into Austria, where we lived for a month. That is a really long time, and we were fully cared for and supported by the Jewish community. And after we lived in Austria for a month, the truth is we didn't even know if we were going to Israel or coming to the United States. We didn't know where we were going. People are like, are you going to stay in Austria? And we were like, we really don't know, because we didn't. And after we lived in Austria for a month, we crossed the border again. And we lived in Ladispoli, Italy, which was a huge absorption center. And we lived there for 6 months. That is a really long time. I know there are people here who are like, I have always wanted to live in Italy for 6 months. It was not, I don't want you to think we were like bicycling around like Tuscany. So we lived in an absorption center in Ladispoli, Italy for 6 months, fully cared for and supported by the Jewish community. And after we lived in Ladispoli, Italy for 6 months, people were like, what's your plan? We're like, we don't really know. I mean, there's a lot of people going to Israel. There's a lot of people coming to the US. Some people may be going other places in Europe. We actually didn't know. We didn't have anywhere to go. We didn't have anyone waiting for us. When we got on the plane in Rome, we got off the plane at Kennedy Airport in New York. And I remember, you could hear I grew up in New Jersey. I remember when I was in grade 5, it was like right around this time of year. I had Miss Campitello. We were studying about pilgrims, because New Jersey, and Thanksgiving. And we had to write a story called How My Family Came to America. And my story was really short. It was like a few months ago, we stepped off the plane at Kennedy Airport. Period. So Miss Campitello is like, that is not how you write a family story. You have to go and interview your parents. So she gave me a list of questions I should ask my parents. And one of them I had to ask my mom. I was working with my mom. I said, Mom, like, what did you want to do when you came to America? And she's like, I don't understand your question. So I like slowed it down and spoke louder, because that's what you have to do when people don't understand you. And I was like, Mom, like, what did you want to do when you came to America? Like, did you want to see a Broadway show? Did you want to see the Statue of Liberty? And my mom is like, are you nuts? She's like, I had nowhere to be. I had nowhere to go. I had $400 in 2 suitcases. You were 5. I was 26. Daddy was 28. It was the scariest day of my life. And she said that when she got off the plane at Kennedy, she saw a person, and the person was holding a sign, and the sign had our name written on it in Russian. And my mom, who had taken this incredible leap of faith for this like possibility that maybe we could have our lives turn out in some other way than the way that they were going to turn out, And she left behind her country. She didn't speak the language. She didn't know what to do or where to go. And she had this like hope that maybe if she made this leap of faith and it would just work out differently than how it was slated to work out. And my mom, who's a very powerful person, who had traveled now for 7 months in the immigration, left behind everything she knew with 2 suitcases and $400, a sick husband, and me, 5 years old. You could tell I was really short on ADD medication then. My mom said, oh my God, we have made it to New York, and this person holding our sign with our name written on it in Russian is the KGB. And people always like say, oh, that's so crazy. But that's what happens when you don't know, when you feel like anything can be taken from you and that like the thing that's the most important, the hope that you have for your future could just disappear and disintegrate just like that. And my mom, who had been traveling at that point for 7 months with my very sick dad and a very energetic me, said, this is it. I can't keep moving. I can't keep shifting. I can't like my husband is dying, my daughter is living in absorption centers, whatever it's gonna be, it's gonna be. And she took my dad and she took the suitcase and she went to this person and she said, I am Irina Gerlovin. And this person said, perfect, I'm Kitty from Passaic and I am your host mom. She takes my mom, she takes my dad, she takes the suitcase. She puts us on an escalator, she tells us to look for her husband who's named Charlie. Charlie is an immigration attorney. And he basically single-handedly wrote the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. He didn't really do that, but she was really proud of him. And that's why all the Jews are coming to the United States in the first place, and. From JFK Airport to Passaic, New Jersey, a trip which on a good day with no traffic takes an hour and a quarter. Kitty did not stop talking. And my parents spoke no English. So we get to Passaic, and there are these 2 buildings in Passaic. They're like, they face each other, and they are like your classic brick New Jersey apartment buildings with 4 floors. I showed you today, Bob, like I was like, oh, that's kind of like the building those buildings to this day, they call them the Kremlin, because all the Russian immigrants came through there. We all lived there. What's that? Yeah, so we lived in the Kremlin, and we get up there on the first day, and Kitty takes us to the 3rd floor, and she takes out her key, and she swings open the door, and she says, now listen, this apartment is yours, but it is not yours forever. Because you people are going to get great jobs, and you're going to become very successful, and you are going to send your children to summer camp and private school. You know why? That's what we do. You're going to do it too. But this apartment is yours for as long as you need it, and it's here as a gift from the Jewish community. And she walks us into a fully furnished apartment. I'm talking about towels, I'm talking about chairs, I'm talking about bed linens, I'm talking about table linens, I'm talking about food, I'm talking about business suits for my parents to wear on job interviews, toys for someone like me because you knew I was traveling without them, clothing for me. We had this couch, which we had for many, many, many years, and it was like this couch, and it had these Ziploc things that Jewish people used to put on couches so you don't sit on the couch, and then you stick to them in the summer or whatever. Like, I'm telling you that because it wasn't the junky things you throw away. It was the things that you would put in the homes of your own loved ones, your own children when they go to college, and they came from houses exactly like yours. Those business suits belonged to your parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or whoever it was that was involved in that movement. It didn't just show up in my house. It showed up in hundreds of thousands of homes all over the world. And that was a huge effort. Hi. You missed the first part, but don't worry, we're going to catch you up. We're glad you're here. Thank you. So I want to tell you that there's a lot of stories about like coming to America and how we didn't know what how we didn't know what broccoli was and how we didn't know what kiwis were and all the regular things about immigrants moving to new countries. But I want you to know that the reason we came to Passaic, New Jersey is because it was discovered somewhere along the way that my dad had a heart condition. It's not clear if he had a pre-existing heart condition that we didn't know about and it was aggravated by his accident, or if something happened and in the treatment and the hepatitis. But it ended up my dad had a heart condition, and what we later learned was that in New York City there was tremendous breakthrough work being done in cardiac care. And so just think like late 70s, early 80s, New York, artificial valves, artificial hearts, all that stuff. And the reason we came to New Jersey is because the Jewish community, who was basically moving people like us around like pawns, thinking, okay, where does this family need to go? And where does that family need to go? And what are the resources they're going to need? And this one's going to need to be close to New York. So they put us in Passaic, New Jersey, and Kitty, our host mom, would come every day with a person from JFS, and they would say, okay, we're going to take you to a different doctor. And so they would take my dad to all these different doctors, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, all these places. My parents were like, we went to a new state today. It's called Connecticut. And, you know, they would like try and, you know, show me where it was on the map and who they saw and, you know, what they did there. And that's how it went day by day. But regrettably, the answer was always consistent. My dad's condition had been left untreated for so long, and it was in fact so serious that no one felt that they were going to take him on as a surgical client. And so they started having conversations with my mom, who is 26, and my dad is 28, and I am 5, and my mom has no family in the United States. And they start telling my mom, you know, in the United States, we can keep people really comfortable until they die. And that was the trajectory for my dad. That my mom was going to be a widow before she's 30. She doesn't speak the language. She doesn't have a job. Her family's not here. She left behind her whole life. She's going to be alone with me. It was a really difficult time. JFS was involved. The community was involved. Everyone was bringing meals. It was that kind of thing. But here's what I want you to get. You know how it works in the Jewish community where like we showed up and we are finding out that we're kind of from the same city, and then someone else has a grandmother from Kharkoc, and so on and so forth? You know how that like Jewish geography thing works? Here's what I want you to get. Through a gift that remains anonymous until today, someone heard about my family and my dad and the story, and they happened to know that there was a doctor on the West Coast at Cedars-Sinai who was doing some sort of experimental heart treatment. And it's not really clear if it was the kind of thing that my dad needed or maybe a different kind of doctor. Here's what I want you to get. Someone who knew someone else, paid to put that doctor on a plane in California to fly clear across the country and get off the plane in New York City, where we ourselves arrived not even 6 months prior. He met with my mother, my father, Kitty, and a translator, and he explained the exceptional risk of an experimental surgery. He and his team performed the surgery the next day. That was in 1980. 1981, my brother was born. 1982, my father went skiing again. 1984, my mom decided she was going to get another master's degree. 1986, my dad did the same. 1990, I graduated from high school. Both of my parents were there. 94, I graduated from college. Both of my parents were there. 95, my brother was bar mitzvahed at the Kotel. Both of my parents were there. Everything I have, and everything I will accomplish, and everything that my children have, and everything that my children will accomplish is because of you and people like you standing up at a critical moment. Everything for the rest of our lives. I feel like on Seinfeld I'm about to like yada yada the best part, you know? But I promised Bob it's not going to be more than 20 minutes, and I think it's already more than 20 minutes. I'm going to skip ahead. I met my husband, I went to college, I got married, I did a master's degree, you know, like all that. And then I end up living in Greensboro, North Carolina. I went there for a job. And when I get to Greensboro, I hear that we have a sister city relationship with a place called Beltsy, Moldova. In case your geography is like my geography, I will tell you that Moldova is a completely landlocked country between Romania and Ukraine. And actually now people are like, I know where Moldova is, because it's really in the news a lot, because I think something like 17% of their population is now Ukrainian refugees. But back when I was doing this work, I didn't know where Moldova was, so I thought maybe I'd just catch you up in case you're in the same boat. So I said to our Federation director, why do we have a sister city relationship? in Belzi, Moldova. And she said, well, they have 2,500 Jews, and we have 2,500 Jews. I'm thinking, Des Moines also has 2,500 Jews, so like you could be also partnered with Belzi, Moldova if you really wanted to be. So I said, well, what do we do there? And she said, well, you know, before the war, they had 60,000 Jews. That's a lot of Jews. And after the war, they only had like 3,000 Jews. So we are basically trying to rebuild Jewish life by running Jewish summer family camps. I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. She said, do you think so? I said, yeah. She said, good, because next year we want you to run it. I'm like, I've been living in Greensboro for 1 minute. I'm already like running something at the Federation. This is just great. So basically, I get 9 other people together, and we're going to go and we're going to run a summer camp. It just happens to be in Moldova, and we're going to have bar mitzvahs, and we're going to bake challah. We're going to teach them to bless their children. We're going to talk about Sharansky. We're going to talk about Jewish heroes. We're going to talk about the calendar. Basically, al regel echad. While standing on one foot, we're going to teach them everything in 1 week that they need to know about being Jewish, and then we're going to leave and hopefully come back the following year, and you know they'll keep it up somehow. So we get 9 other people, and they're also like, where do you want me to go, and how are we going to get there? And we get there after 23 hours of travel, and I am the only person in the room who speaks Russian and English. So I'm the only person that can communicate with everyone. So we have this Russian dinner. Bob, you will confirm, Russian dinner, heavy on the alcohol, heavy on the pickles. That's basically Russian dinner. So we get there, we travel 23 hours away from our house, we're having Russian dinner, and the guy that sits next to me reminds me so much of my dad, and he says, my name is Oleg, and I am your driver. I said, that is very nice, очень приятно. And he says to me, what do you do? And I said, I am the dean of admissions of a Jewish boarding school. And he said, really? What kind of Jewish parent would ever send a child to a boarding school? And I said, this school is for very talented kids. And he said, really? I have 2 very talented kids. And I am thinking to myself, God, take me now. I am the dean of admissions of a Jewish school. Every single day looks exactly the same. Jewish parents and their remarkably talented Jewish children. I have traveled 23 hours away from my house, and this guy is like, you know, my kids, they can do math. I'm like, shocker. And they can read. I'm like, and they're like in high school, right? So that's really amazing that they can read. Anyway, I'm like, please let this day end. Anyway, it was evening, it was morning, the first day is over, we have a little bit of travel, and then camp starts. And on my first day at camp, I'm teaching my class in Russian. My Russian is super rusty, but I'm getting through it, and there's a knock on my door, and it's Oleg. And I say, what's up? And he says, when you're done with this class, I want a word with you. So I get myself together, I finish up my class, I'm giving myself a gold star, and I walk out, and he says, Alina, this is my daughter. Her name is Anya, and she's really smart. And I said, oh, I'm so sure that she is so smart. And he says, Alina, as a woman and as a Jew, my daughter has no future in this country. When you leave in 1 week, would you take my child? And I am thinking to myself, this is probably not what my husband meant when he said, bring me something back. So I decide, the big thing about being the dean of admissions of a school is like you don't make any decisions. There's a committee, they decide everything. There's a yes pile and a no pile and a maybe pile, and that's the pile you vote on, and that's how it goes. So I decide I'm entitled to make 1 decision a year, and I'm going to decide on this child, and I'm going to deem her inappropriate for the school. So I sit with her and I say, Anya, you know, your parents, they think you're very smart, but this is a school for really talented kids, so you would have to be really, really smart and be prepared to work really, really hard in a different language. And she said, well, I'm good in languages. I said, is that so? She says, yes. I said, how good? She said, very good. I said, which language? She says, I speak 5 languages. I said, really? Which ones? So she says, I speak Romanian and Russian because those are required. I also speak English, as you can tell, because why would I speak to her in Russian when I have to check out her English? So she's speaking in pretty fluent English, you know, some a little bit slower, but, and I said, what are the other 2? She says, well, I'm good in languages, so I speak German and I also speak Hebrew. I said, why do you speak Hebrew? She said, because I'm good in languages. I said, how good is your Hebrew? She says, it's great. I said, well, how come it's great? She said, well, I started learning in school, but I really love language, so I just kept learning, and I got really good at it. I said, how good? She said, great. I said, how great? She said, I won the national Talmud competition. So I say to her, because I'm not an idiot, the National Talmud Competition of the Republic of Moldova? How many people were competing in it? And she gives me the most bitter teenage look, and she says to me, no, actually, I won the National Talmud Competition of Europe, and I competed in Hebrew. I'm like, oh, how's your math? She's like, I'm going into grade 9, so I'm in pre-calc. I'm like, she's coming home. So then I said, how about science? She said, you won't be disappointed. I said, well, do you do anything else? She said, yes. I play volleyball, and I run track, and I play the guitar. So you could probably tell from being with me for like the last 15 or 20 minutes, I'm an independently minded Jewish woman, and I don't like to ask for permission a whole lot, but I had been married for 1 year, and I decide I need to call my husband and just ask if this is okay, because that kid is coming home. So I get a calling card, and I have 4 minutes, and I call my husband, and he is like, I can't believe you're calling, how's the food? I'm like, cabbage and potatoes, listen to this. He's like, okay, one question. I was like, what is your question? He's like, do they have the motorcycle with a sidecar called the Ural? I'm like, you gotta hear this. I got here on Thursday, I met the driver. He wants us to raise his kids. He's like, Alina, what the Jewish community did for you, we will absolutely do for these children. And not in 1 week, but in about 3 weeks, Anya came to join us as part of our family, and she became a student at the American Hebrew Academy, and she graduated from there at the top of her class, and she now lives in Connecticut, and she's married, and she has 3 kids. And 2 years after Anya came, her birth sister Sasha also came to be part of our family. She's a middle child, so I'm not even talking about her, which I think middle children are used to. She's also equally impressive in her own right. Anya does hedge funds, and Sasha lives in Brooklyn and works at Deloitte, and she's really amazing also. And we have my daughter Sabine, who is named for my father, who was her Saba. He's unfortunately no longer living. And she is turning 16 in December, and she is now in Israel on Alexander Muss. She was attained through slightly more conventional methods of childrening. And I have so much more to tell you. I also went to Budapest, and I worked with Ukrainian refugees in the last couple of months. So I want you to know that everything I have and everything I will accomplish and everything my children have and everything my children will accomplish is because of you and people like you. And when we give to organizations like Federation, it's really, really easy to lose track that it goes to help people. And who does it really help? Does it really make a difference? Yes, it does. I'm like the face behind every dollar that you give, and I am one face of hundreds of thousands of faces that you have helped impact. I could stand here and I could say thank you on behalf of myself or my family or my children or their family or the hundreds of thousands of other people who look like me, sound like me, look different, dress different, maybe whatever. But those are all the people that we help. Those are the people I help with my own lion gift. It's why I endowed my lion gift. Everything I have, everything I will accomplish is because of you and people like you. And I hope you'll continue to support the Federation. I hope that you know that in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, someone like me or my child or my grandchild is going to stand in front of you or your child or your grandchild or, God willing, your great-grandchild. And they're going to say that the gift that you made today changed their life. That is the work. On behalf of myself and all the people that you help, on behalf of humanity, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's it. Questions, right? I have, I've been to Kiev, and I went to like Moscow and St. Petersburg, which of course are not. And I've been to Odessa, and I've been to Moldova 6 times, where my kids are from. I have not been back. Americans right now are not insurable in Ukraine, and so I haven't been able, I couldn't even go to Poland, so the closest I could get is Budapest, and I ran an absorption center there for 3 weeks in April, over Pesach. Like literally reading about the Exodus while living through a real life Exodus. Very powerful. Very, very powerful.
Alina, thank you so much for sharing your story. Can you talk for a few minutes about your recent trip to Budapest, what it was like to work with this new group of Ukrainian refugees, what that meant to you, to be there, and what you were carrying with to give to them from you, your family, your community?
Great, thank you for that question. So I went through the JFNA Volunteer Hub. So JFNA, the kind of parent organization for the Federation, said, you know, we have a lot of people with a lot of talents. The only people who could go were people who were fluent Russian, Ukrainian speakers. So I got to go, and we had 3 groups. So, we had one group that was split into 3 sections. So one section was at the border, right on the border. And there are four ways to get out of Ukraine right now. So you know there's, you can go to Poland, you can go to Slovakia, you can go to Moldova, and you can go to Hungary. So those were the 4 places. And wherever there is a crossing point, there is a Israeli flag and a place where Jews can just go and congregate. Part of that is we're ready. We know what it is to be on the move. So that's the plus and the very difficult piece of that. I found that very impactful. So there was a group of our team that was at the border, and then there was a group of us who were running the hotels, the absorption centers, and they were not just for Jews, but you know, if there were Jews that were coming through there that needed to get to Israel, they could stay a bit longer. If there were people who needed to get to Germany or Switzerland or wherever they were going, we tried to recreate their paperwork and things like that. And then there was a third group that was at the consulates, and so they were trying to help people get their paperwork ready so they could go to their next kind of port of entry. And so this is what would happen. We would get a call from the border, and they would say, listen, we're sending a bus. We're just filling up a bus right now. It looks like there's people coming, and we don't really know a lot about them, but it looks like there's some elderly people, some people traveling with very young infants and children. It looks like you're going to need some diapers. You might need some adult diapers. It looks like you're going to need some insulin. You're going to need drops from a glaucoma. You're going to need people who, you know, have lost their eyeglasses. You know, whatever it is, we have people traveling with cats and dogs and hamsters, and you know, they're going to be there in 3.5 hours. And then our group, which was 4 people, would run out in Budapest and be like, I'm looking for insulin. I'm looking for adult diapers. I'm looking for, you know, diapers. And we would be like, all the people at the border were men. So they were like, we were like, what size children's diapers? They're like, this size. Like, you know, like, we don't even know what we're looking for. We're running around Budapest in a different language, trying to figure out what we need. And then in 3.5 hours, people would show up, a whole bus full of people in wheelchairs, people with cats and dogs. You would have people open their suitcases, and all they had in there was cat food or dog food because they just wanted to take care of their animal. It was absolutely unbelievable. I told Bob, like, as a humanitarian who's done a lot of humanitarian work, who's been abroad, who's been in third world countries, I was like, we're just gonna go there and it's gonna be great and we're gonna make a big difference. I've never been in a war. I didn't understand that these people lost everything. They lost their homes. They had to leave behind their sons or their fathers or their uncles, and it was Huge, huge trauma. We had people from Israel coming to do trauma care. We had people who were doing art therapy and cooking therapy and, you know, all the things that you would want. We had people who had never met Jews before who were like, listen, I'm not Jewish. I don't know that I can be in this hotel. And we're like, go upstairs, take a shower, have something to eat. We'll help you get to your next place. And they were like, you don't understand, we're not Jews. I'm like, it's all right, you know? So, and they said like, why are you being so kind to us? Or like, my grandparents, they were involved in the Holocaust on the wrong side. I don't know that I can take this from you. So all those things were right there. Very, very powerful, very difficult. Yes, people sent, you know, clothing and things like that. The truth is, the Jewish community had what it needed to take care of people, to give them a soft landing. One of the biggest issues that we had is that we didn't have documents. So people, you know, they had their passports in a bank and their bank was closed because everybody withdrew their money, or their house was bombed, or they had a child who was under 2 that hadn't traveled because it was COVID, or they had really elderly people who were in wheelchairs who have not left the country or lived on the 9th floor of a walk-up, and, you know, all that. I want to tell you one really, really extraordinary story, which is that while we were there, we heard of a special operation. I was surprised this didn't make the media here. It made the media in Israel, where people who had to be left behind. So that included people with issues like children with autism who could not travel easily because of the noise and the amount of people and the way that you had to travel in those early days. So there were literally parents who left behind autistic children. There were people, or autistic, you know, young adults who couldn't travel. There were people who had to leave behind parents who had dementia, or loved ones who were quadriplegic, who they couldn't move around. And while we were in Budapest, we heard of a special operation where there were Israelis, and they flew into Ukraine. It was very hard to get into Ukraine, and they hired 200 ambulances. The rescue was 200 people. They hired 200 ambulances, and what I didn't know is that an ambulance cannot cross a country line. And so they hired 200 ambulances in Ukraine who took the people who did not get to leave, but whose loved ones were already in Israel, and they had a special rescue operation. 1 ambulance with 1 Israeli doctor or medic to 1 person. They loaded those people up, they got them to the border of the next country. They had 200 more ambulances in 50 ambulances each, roughly, in each of the 4 countries. And when they got them on those ambulances, they took them off the ambulances and put them in hospitals where they rented beds in the other countries. And then they had medical flights to take them into Israel. I am talking about a huge operation. I also want you to know, it's not like you're driving an ambulance and you can get gas. So they had to hire gas trucks to ride alongside the ambulances so they could get them to the borders. I'm talking about a nightmare when it comes to logistics. You know why we do that? We don't leave people behind. It's Passover. We're reading about the Exodus. We're watching an Exodus, and this whole special operation is happening. It's not even in the news. It's like, yeah, well, that's what we do. We do that because you give, you know, because I give. It was an incredible source of pride.
Other questions? It's cold outside, people. So the longer we're in here, the less.
I'm giving you all my good North Carolina energy. No? Nothing?
How do you deal, and what do you think about the Russian neutrality in the conflict? You know, how what role do Russian Jews, if they have any role in this humanitarian help? Can they help? Are they available?
Do you mean Russian Jews who are living here, or Russian Jews who are living in Russia?
No, living in Russia.
Oh.
Yeah, what's the situation with them today?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I understand that one of the reasons that Israel has not provided more military aid in Ukraine is because they think they're going to have to take the Russian Jews out. So I think they're trying to weigh their options. I understand that Israel is helping on the Ukraine side now, but it's kind of undercover, from what I understand. I think Israel is waiting because they think they're going to have to take Russian Jews out. Not everybody wants to leave, as you know, but I just don't know. I don't know. I'm not, and it's interesting because a lot of people who live in Russia right now, including like my older children's birth mother was in St. Petersburg, and they were like, you need to come here. You know, you need to come to the United States right away. We're going to send you a ticket. And she's like, why would I do that? And they were like, because there's a war? And she's like, what are you talking about? She had no idea. So I think like it's not clear. It's not, I don't know what they know over there. So I think it's still a little tricky. What do you think? You sound like you're not from Brooklyn, so.
No, I'm just struggling to understand Israeli neutrality and how they deal with this.
Oh, I see.
I agree with you. Maybe they are undercover operations to help Jews in Russia as well as in the Ukraine.
Mhm.
It's not public, but it's my guess.
I'm thinking the same thing, but I don't have an inside line on that one. Yeah, that's what we heard when we were there. We knew there were Israelis in Russia. We were like, they were operating actually very actively through the Chabad system because a lot of Chabad rabbis didn't leave, and there was like a question about, some Ukrainian Chabad rabbis left and then went right back, and part of the question is that because that's how they're operating inside? I don't know.
The other comment is, this is what we hear, and I'm not an historian, but Putin has been not unfriendly to Jews. So, and there is a history of Ukrainians being unfriendly in the past starting with the pogroms against Jews.
Yes, of course.
So it's a very difficult conflict to understand for us.
I would
Jews.
agree. I was born in Kharkov. My mom was born in Kharkov, and she never wanted to go back. She hates that country. She hates it. And all these years, like my mom, she came in when she was in her 20s, so she has a thick, Soviet accent. And when people ask her where she's from, she says New Jersey. And they say, they're asking where she's from, like not New Jersey. So they say, no, like, where are you from before New Jersey? She said, New Jersey. And she doesn't even want to say where she's from because she hates it so much. And then all of a sudden, and I myself, if people ask me where I'm from, I say, well, I was born in the former Soviet Union, but I think of myself as pretty much an American Jew, maybe a Russian-speaking American Jew, but I never, ever called myself Ukrainian. When I was there, it was like SSSR, it was like a different thing. I never even thought of myself as Ukrainian. I spoke Russian in the house. I didn't speak Ukrainian in the house. So I myself didn't see myself particularly Ukrainian. And my mom thinks that that country hurt my father, and it didn't give her the care, and she couldn't go to the school that she wanted, and she couldn't study the thing that she wanted. So she has a lot of very heavy, big feelings about there. And all of a sudden, when the war broke out, it felt like for the first time, she and I and many, I think, other Ukrainians saw that country differently. Like, oh, okay, here's this president who's really likable and Jewish, and and so she at least had to take another look and say, is that the same Ukraine that I left? Would I do something for the people now? And I just think it shifted for a lot of us, at least for me and for my mom, I should say, and other people that I've spoken to about it too. They kind of got pulled back there a little bit in a more positive way. I don't know that that's the case for everybody, but I think it's, as my teenager says, Mom, it's complicated, It's kind of complicated, I guess. Yeah.
Oleg, is he still in Moldova?
Thank you for asking Oleg, the dad, the birth dad. I will tell you that. Is Oleg still in Moldova? Yes. Here, I'll just talk about the birth family. So Oleg and his wife Galia were amazing. And to be with a parent who is giving up a child, we all probably know children who are pretty annoying. But if your own child was even maximally difficult, it's a big thing to be with a parent who says, I've raised this child until 14, and this child is really exceptional, and I think it is in this child's best interest for me to send them with you. That's a really humbling thing. It's a difficult thing, it's a humbling thing, and they're extraordinary people for having done it, because there's just no scenario in my own life where I could see having the strength of character to do that. So we sent the children back every summer so that they continue to have a relationship with the birth family. And they called us Alina and Chris by our first names. And we didn't try to replace their parents, we just tried to parent them. I think that's probably the fairest way. And when Anya graduated, her mom came for the first time, the birth mom, and Gala, and she stayed here for a month with us, and got to see a little bit of the United States. They would never allow the parents out together because they thought that they wouldn't come back. So only one parent could get a visa. But when Sasha was graduating from university, they let both parents out. And they both came, and they had an amazing trip, and they stayed for about a month, traveled around with the kids and with us, and then they went back to Moldova, and about 4 days later, the dad died very suddenly. He was 49. My own dad died when he was 46, so I hate that we have that in common. He was an exceptional person, just very, obviously lives in my heart, and no longer living, but mom is still here, and she comes and she, takes care of Anya's kids, who are all have birthdays coming up. So 7, 5, and about to turn 2 are her kids. So mom is here and taking care of them, and very much a part of the family. Anyone else? Other questions? Okay, I'm going to hang out and drink tea. So. Loved being here. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, of course.
Just a quick thank you to everyone again for joining us here. I know it is quite cold out. Thank you again for those who are joining us virtually as well. And we hope to see everyone again at future events. Join us in Bookie if you are here in person, or not. I mean, I guess you could drive out for some tea and schmoozing. Thank you.